Welcome back to another week here on MWO Sports. Myself, Ryan Drury. I'll be joined by Steve Sabern and Clarkey, and we will be joined by friend of the show, Rob Longley, the Blue Jays columnist for the Toronto Sun, to talk about the Jays season so far, some standout performances, but mostly troubles with the bullpen. What can the Jays do to improve this? Will they target somebody in a trade as trade deadline approaches this July? We'll also chat a little bit about the ongoing Stanley Cup playoffs and some serious allegations against the Chicago Blackhawks organization. And finally, at the end, we'll be joined by our wagering expert, Kris Abbott from Coolbet, to talk about some hot bets to make this weekend. You're listening to and watching MWO Sports, brought to you by Coolbet.co.
This is MWO Sports.
Welcome back to MWO Sports, brought to you by Coolbet.co. Ryan Drury alongside Clarkey and Steve Sabern. Very pleased to be joined by friend of the show and a recurring special guest, Rob Longley, the Blue Jays columnist and reporter for the Toronto Sun. Rob, how you doing?
Good to be back, guys. Lots to talk about in baseball these days, man. Holy moly.
Boy, there sure is. We'll get to sticky stuff and spider tack and all that good stuff later. Let's talk about the team you cover. Obviously, the Toronto Blue Jays. A lot of people around here have a vested interest in how well this team is doing or not doing at times. Boy, the bats look really impressive, but the bullpen has become the story of this team's season right now. Past what Vlad is doing to baseballs, it's the bullpen. In your estimation, what is it that's going wrong for the Jays there? How soon do they need to make a trade? And just your overall impression of the team's performance so far through almost 3 months.
Yeah, no easy answer to what's going on with the bullpen, really. I mean, first off, they lost 3 of their better arms due to injury, starting right through at spring training when they lost Kirby Yates, who would have been the closer. And then, the guys that were there, they pretty much overachieved in April and May, and they probably came back closer to what their actual performance level should have been expected to be. And now they just can't get out in high leverage situations. I mean, we're seeing guys getting walked in for runs with the bases loaded. We're seeing wild pitches. We're seeing batters hit. And I mean, it's almost to the point where if the starting pitcher hits the 6th inning and the pitch count hits 90, it's like, oh man, how are they going to blow it tonight? I mean, 4 of their last 6 games, they've lost a lead in the 7th inning or later. And until they get some help, I mean, I think we're going to see more of that. But that's the issue. Like, where's the help going to come from? They're not going to make a rash trade at this point because they're not going to give up a ton of prospects or any important roster player this early, this far away from the trade deadline. So, I mean, it's almost like they're throwing these guys in there and hoping that they find some form until we get to the last week in July where General Manager Ross Atkins can maybe make a trade. He'll make a trade of some sort to shore up the pitching core, but will it be too late? I mean, and I think that's a fair question. Teams in baseball, it's a roller coaster. It's a long season. Yeah, we hear that all the time. But this team's back to 500 again. They're 33-33 before this Thursday night game against the New York Yankees. And yeah, they have 19 games left against the Baltimore Orioles, but you still have to get 27 outs a night. And I'm not sure exactly how they're going to do that.
Rob, this seems like it would be like a wonderland for my old host, Bob McCowan, doing Jays talk after games with all the blown saves and blown leads and everything else. And just some of the base running mistakes, some of the fielding mistakes. We saw Stripling tear a strip off Joe Panik yesterday. Do you think it's a boiling point? Like, do you think that the team is getting frustrated? And what can be done about that?
Yeah, we never know unless we're behind the closed doors how frustrated they are. But I can't see any way where they're not frustrated at this point because they know that they're a much better team. They know that they're a team that can put up 12 runs a night, and they put up 18 in Boston on the weekend. But it doesn't matter if you're going to continue to lose games the way that they've been losing them. And I think Clarkey, you hit on an underrated flaw in this team. An off-season priority was to get better defensively, and I think they have gotten a little bit better defensively. But in at least 3 of those 4 most recent losses, we've seen defensive miscues. Third base is a disaster now. It doesn't matter who they have over there, whether it's Cavan Biggio or whether it's Santiago Espinal's a little bit better, but he's a guy who's going to shuffle between AAA in the majors anyway. And Joe Panik struggled over there last night, which caused a little bit of an incident, as you alluded to, with with Ross Stripling, the starting pitcher, having a bit of a tantrum on the mound, which you don't really do. He shouldn't have done it.
No.
But I guess that's where the frustration is, We've seen the tight shots of Vlad Guerrero Jr. in the dugout after a couple of these really disheartening losses. And you wonder when, if a young group like this will start to lose a little bit of confidence, if they realize that the offense isn't going to be enough to carry it, if pitching is going to continually let them down, and they get further and further away from first place in the American League East. And now the wild card is a bit of an issue too. Again, they're going to go on a bit of a roll at some point during the season. But if you followed them from start to finish, they've never been better than 4 games above 500, and they've never been worse than 3 games below 500. Typically, they're within 2 games of either side of it. So essentially, they're a 500 baseball team, and that's not going to do it in the American League East.
You know what? It's interesting talking about confidence. There's also a consistency because, and I'm going to play a little bit of history here. Like when I grew up watching the Jays in the 90s, you knew Robbie was going to play second. You knew Joe was in, right field. You knew Devon White was in center. Now you've got a rotating defense. Like it really, night in, night out, you don't know who's where or doing what. The order is always shifting. That's got to play on a consistency issue for players as well.
Yeah, I think so. And baseball operations will tell you that that's by design. I mean, they place a premium on versatility, guys that can play multiple positions. And that's all well and good if you need a guy in a quasi-emergency situation to move from second to short or second to third or third to right field. But when you're continually trotting out a different lineup every night, I can't see how that's a comfortable feeling for guys. We've seen it with Vlad Guerrero Jr., who's become an everyday first baseman and playing like an everyday first baseman. And why do you think that is? It's because he's there every day. I mean, he's comfortable over there. But third base, as I mentioned earlier, it's become sort of the black hole of the defense, and it's because they have different guys there every day. Bo Bichette, I mean, they're determined to stick with him as the shortstop, but man, oh man, he doesn't look sharp there day to day either. Their best infielder is Marcus Semien, and they refuse to move him over to shortstop, which is where he should be. Stubbornly, for whatever reason, I suppose they don't want to rub Bichette or his agent the wrong way, because eventually they're going to want to sign him to a long-term deal, and he's the shortstop of the future, and Semien's only here for 1 year. But guys moving around like this all the time, yeah, I think it really hampers the defensive consistency, and we're starting to see a cost with that.
So is Charlie the right guy? Is he going to last, do you think?
It'll be interesting to see how they handle that. I mean, maybe to a flaw on my part, I've mostly been a Charlie Montoyo a supporter. I don't hang a whole lot of what's happened on him, because I firmly believe that a lot of the in-game decisions are basically made in advance. I mean,
by a computer,
what to do, by the front office, by the general manager, by the baseball operations department. Now, if he was John Gibbons and was given instructions prior to the game and on how to do things, Gibbons would have just ripped it out of his book and thrown it in the garbage. But Charlie Montoyo is a guy who spent the vast majority of the last 2 decades working as a minor league manager and then a third base coach in Tampa. And this was his first opportunity to become a major league manager. And it came at a cost. It came with him having to be a little bit of a puppet to the front office, which is somewhat the way of the world in baseball now. Yeah. The old school manager is kind of being faded away.
And Rob, we're seeing it in hockey too, I think, with Bergevin in Montreal and Billy Idol behind the bench.
Yeah. And it's too bad, because you can't make. Why can't you make the odd decision anyway on instinct? And I think a lot of people would like to see that come from Montoyo. The classic example was the other night when he put Dolis in the 9th inning in a tie game, and when he probably should have put his best man in there, Romano, and that was it. The game was over. He justified it afterwards, but I mean, I think his justification came from basically what his instructions were on how to handle that situation. So you'd like to see him manage with his. Before I'm too critical of Charlie Montoyo as a manager, I'd have to believe that he's managing with his gut, and I don't believe that that's the case. I think he's the strings are being pulled by analytics and by the front office, and that maybe he's getting a little bit, he's the easy scapegoat, and maybe he's getting a little bit too much heat from fans at this point.
Yeah, you could certainly agree with that when it comes to his bullpen. Charlie Montoyo, much like Dominique Ducharme, wants more. Let's talk a little bit as we chat with our friend Rob Longley of the Toronto Sun, the Blue Jays columnist. Let's talk a little bit more about the rotation and some of the issues they face there. I mean, Ryu has had a couple of bouncy starts, let's call them, over his last 3 or 4. And I mean, you look at guys like Stripling that have at times performed well, but the story there right now is Robbie Ray, who has become a real gem for this team. He has gone far above and beyond, I think, what most fans and probably the team themselves thought that he could give them. I mean, I know they were confident because they wanted to bring him back, but man, he has performed exceptionally well.
Yeah, that's a great point, Ryan. I mean, you could argue, I mean, you don't want to base a decision on just a handful of starts, but you could argue that he's emerging as the ace of that staff right now. I mean, his strikeout to walk ratio is incredibly good. And here's a guy who spent the most part of his last couple of seasons, like, just throwing balls all the time. He walked way too many guys. He always had the stuff, but he didn't have the command. And somehow between some of the work that he's put in and the work that he's done with Blue Jays pitching coach Pete Walker, he's got that command back. And with the command comes the confidence. And now with that confidence, his fastball has got a little bit more velocity on it, and he's found himself really in a groove. And it dates back to last summer when the Jays acquired him at the trade deadline. He was going to be a free agent in the offseason, became a free agent, but something clicked with him, with Robbie Ray and the Jays at that point. I mean, he improved some of his form in the short time that he was with the team, the month or so last year. And he was the first free agent to sign. I mean, the Jays wanted him and he wanted to go back to the Jays. They both saw upside. I mean, Ray figured that he was getting his form back because of what he had worked on with the Jays staff. And the Jays said, hey man, for a 1-year deal, this guy's going to fit in our rotation and we see tremendous upside. Now, did they see him being as efficient and as lights out as he's been? Probably not. But I mean, you could really ask the question, where would they be without Robbie Ray? Especially after what you've suggested, Ryan, that Ryu has kind of wobbled a little bit over his last 3 or 4 starts. And that's going to be a concern if that continues.
It's interesting. When's the last time the Jays had not one but 2 good lefties in their lineup? It's been a while, even one decent lefty.
Yeah, and then arguably have 3 if Steven Matz can sort of get some consistency to his game. 3 lefties in a rotation. I don't know when that's ever been, like, when they've ever had 3 good lefties in their rotation. It's been back to our youth. Clarkey would probably be the answer to that.
Jimmy Key, John Cerruti. Well, was Cerruti really a starter? I guess he was, but but who else? I don't know.
David Wells.
Yeah.
Boomer. Yeah.
No, it's interesting, and when you look at the pitchers they have, pitch counts. Are they going to keep riding these pitch counts? Like it was tough on Stripling on Wednesday night because he was doing well, and they brought Sanchez in as a pinch hitter, and people say, oh, he should have gone to the bullpen. Well, there's no bullpen to go to, and Sanchez got the better of him. But when do you start tossing pitch counts out the window?
Well, they've kind of become a little bit more liberal in their approach to that this year. I mean, we're seeing guys at least get into the high 80s and usually in the 90s and a couple of times up into the triple digits, which we never saw last year. I mean, we only saw one start get to 7 innings all of last season. Circumstances were a little different with the shortened COVID season and all that. But now we've seen, I think probably a dozen Blue Jays starts get into the 7th inning. So they're becoming a little bit more liberal with those pitch counts, and maybe that's a function of the fact that there aren't enough reliable arms in the bullpen. I mean, it's almost like, getting back to the way that Montoyo was handling things now, it's almost like there is a bit of a desperation there because there is zero confidence in too many arms in that bullpen. So that being the case, as long as the pitcher's feeling good and his velocity is still up, why not let him get to 96, 97, 102 pitches if he's still feeling strong? If that buys you one less inning of having to go to that bullpen and one less arm on a night out of that bullpen, then you're going to be better served, especially when things are starting to be a little bit dodgy like they've been over the last couple of weeks.
Maybe they're dodgy because they don't have sticky stuff on the ball anymore. Ryan, do you want to set this up? Go ahead.
Transition, Clarky.
Well, I before we start talking about Spider Tack, I want to throw three names at you, Rob, that I wrote down. Some guys that are listed and have been listed on most people's, including MLB.com's high trade list. And I know you said that the Jays, and we've heard this, and we've heard Ross Atkins say as much, that they don't want to make a rash trade. And we all know about their, high-end prospects. They've got the number 5 rated farm system in Major League Baseball. But if this team is talented enough offensively, which I think we can all say they are, and that's, remember, without George Springer, albeit 1 game and 1 home run, why would they not be aggressive with some of their prospects? Maybe I'm not talking about necessarily, the Austin Martins of the world, but why would they not be aggressive with guys like Miguel Geraldo or Jordan Groshans, who, much like Martin, their prime position is shortstop? And if Bo is the guy who's in his early 20s and you got Vlad in his early 20s, Biggio, if this is the core, why not get aggressive and potentially go after some of these guys? I want you to put your GM hat on and give me the likelihood of a deal you'd maybe make to acquire one of these three. I've got Richard Rodriguez, who's a reliever with the Pirates. He's extremely high on trade bait lists, got a great slider. It plays really well, high whiff rate on that pitch. Kyle Gibson, who's a starter that's had a surprisingly great year for the moribund Texas Rangers, who can't seem to win games at all, but Gibson seems to win every time he gets on the hill. And Yimi Garcia, a more veteran guy with the Marlins, who's got extremely high velocity and a really, really scary sinker. Of those three, who would you target for the Jays to go after? One of them's a starter, of course. Who would you maybe go after, and what would a price look like?
Yeah, I would say of those three, the one that maybe intrigues me the most would be Rodriguez, and for a couple of reasons. Like you said, he seems to be an emerging guy as a reliever, and a guy who's got some versatility to him. But also on a Pirates team that's going to be willing to move at the trade deadline. And the Jays also have a good relationship with the front office there. Ben Cherington, who's the general manager of the Pirates, was in the front office of the Blue Jays just as recently as last year. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's a player that they look at seriously. And to the larger point, I mean, you make a great point, because as reluctant as this front office, the Jays front office, is to part with their future, I think you have to evaluate it from a different perspective as well. I mean, right now we're coming up to the midpoint of year 2 of a 4-year deal for Hyunjin Ryu. So do you want to waste 2 full years of 4 years at $80 million? You're coming up, and now I understand that Springer hasn't played yet. He's played 4 games, but he's going to be a factor with this team at some point. 1 year of the 6. Do you want to waste one of those big money 6 years to have a middling team that isn't going to be able to compete because their bullpen isn't deep enough? So yeah, the heat's really, really going to be on Ross Atkins come trade deadline, and you'd like to see him get a little bit of Alex Anthopoulos in him. Maybe not to the extreme, because Anthopoulos did tend to leave the cupboards bare when it was go mode, when it was green light mode to try to have a playoff contender. But when you've got this young core and you don't want them to get frustrated, and when you've put out the money for a starting pitcher and a superstar outfielder, you better take advantage of that for as many years as you can, because all of those guys aren't going to be around forever, and they're getting pretty close to now time, if not this year, next year. So, I mean, the American League East, nobody's going to fold over in this division. So you literally have to do something by the trade deadline. The other thing that drives me crazy, just to go off on a bit of a tangent, everybody says, well, now they're coming up to the easy part of the schedule. They still have 19 games against the Orioles. Well, you know what? They're not going to win 19 from the Orioles. I'm sorry. As bad as the Orioles are, you still have to find a way to get 27 outs every night against a Major League Baseball team. So while they're likely going to have a bit of a break, I mean, there's a lot of distance between them and not only first place in the American League East, but the 2 wildcard spots. So trade deadline is going to be a very important time for this front office, back to the original point. And if they don't get some serious reliever help at that time, it's going to be a wasted season.
I absolutely agree. Don't tell Trey Mancini that the Orioles are easy to beat. That's for sure. All right. Like Clarky mentioned before, I tossed those names your way, Rob. let's talk about sticky stuff. Now, this has been a conversation throughout the entirety of baseball history. Like, pitchers have been doing stuff to the ball, scuffing it with mud, scraping it with sandpaper, all kinds of stuff, taking a tack to it. But now it seems more than ever since the StatCast era came into effect that and we can measure things very accurately, like RPM and spin rate, that it's become so much more pronounced. And the evidence is clear. I mean, the pitchers that throw stuff at higher RPM, whether it's a fastball or especially breaking balls, they're just more effective, and they're getting paid more, and they're winning more, and they're having an effect on games more. What is your opinion on the MLB's stance on this, introducing essentially new rules and how the rules going to be enforced midway through the season, which Tyler Glasnow recently took issue with, and just the situation overall? What do you make of all this?
Yeah, it's a mess, and it's a mess created by baseball at multiple levels. I mean, you mentioned the RPMs that come from having the good sticky stuff. You hear stories now that GMs and agents, when they're negotiating contracts for a pitcher, the most important number isn't wins or losses or even ERA, it's RPM. So that's how crazy it's become. Now, I'm of the belief that baseball had to do something. Yes, it's been going on forever. There's always been foreign substances that have helped players get a grip on a baseball. And I suppose there's a valid argument that some of that is needed. That, I mean, these baseballs are shiny and slippery, and you do have to have a certain level of grip on a baseball to be effective. But it was getting out of control. I mean, guys were using like high-tech stuff and ridiculously sticky stuff. And I mean, that's where these big RPMs were coming from. And it was creating an unlevel playing field, because the guys who were using the stickiest stuff and the most high-tech stuff were having a clear advantage. And the commissioner's office had to step in and do something. I'm just not convinced that they've done it the right way. Some of the pitchers are really upset about it now because they feel that to do this in the mid-season is causing issues with the way they throw, and that's
too bad.
Injuries, blah blah blah. So they had to do something, but I'm not so sure they handled it the right way.
But they just sound like a bunch of whiners to me. And there's been a rosin bag on the back of the mound for as long as I can remember. I know that's supposed to dry your hand, but it has a little tackiness to it too. Yeah. So I just find these guys really a bunch of whiners, and you're right. It sucks. The timing sucks, but just suck it up and move on. That's my opinion.
Well, they're part of the problem because they pushed the envelope too far, right? And eventually baseball had to step in and do something. So it's hard to have a whole lot of sympathy with any of these more vocal pitchers that have been using the really high-tech sticky stuff. So they're coming across as whiners, and it'll be interesting to see if they reach a middle ground. I mean, the commissioner's office seems to be pretty firm with their stance, so I don't think they're going to change.
Yeah, it's a fair point. And I mean, I'm sure everybody in baseball and most baseball fans are aware of the little mini rant Tyler Glasnow went on the other day about him getting injured. And of course, he's one decision away from having Tommy John, which is unfortunate, because I love Tyler Glasnow, but then you see Garrett Cole. I mean, he had that weird exchange with reporters in New York the other day where someone blatantly asked him if he ever used it, and he essentially danced around it for 2 minutes, meaning yes.
Yeah.
And
he misremembers.
He misremembers. Yeah, that'll be at the Supreme Court in 10 years. Yeah, it's weird, because when you look at stuff like that, like I'm all for, and Trevor Bauer just put a video out today, and he's been one of the most outspoken guys on sticky stuff, and, basically told the MLB about this a couple of years ago, and they ignored him. And now look at what he's doing. And Rob, you mentioned, in chatting with GMs and agents, many people out there, including very, dedicated baseball sources, think that part of the reason Bauer got the single highest pay grade of anyone in baseball history from the Dodgers, part of it was because he has a substance that they wanted access to. Not just that he's a good pitcher. He is a good pitcher, but there are a lot of people that believe that. That's why he's making that $40 million. But when you look at this situation, he basically said, you can't just completely take away sticky stuff altogether. Major League Baseball needs to come up with a product of its own that is legalized, that everybody has access to, and of course the rosin bags out there and everything. What's your opinion on that, and how can they go about actually enforcing this, and how much does this fall on the umpires?
Yeah, I guess that's probably the biggest issue with the timing of all of this, because in theory that is the proper solution, finding a uniform substance that everybody can use, and then find a way to enforce it, whether it's umpires or whether it's a random check in the dugout after each inning by another official of baseball. But to come and implement that 60, 70 games into a season, it's if the disgruntled pitchers do have a legitimate gripe, it's in that. It's like, how do we change what we're doing in mid-season? And then, but more to the point, how do you enforce it, and how do you get a uniform substance at this point? I mean, to go from all to nothing, 70 games into a baseball season, I think you're sort of asking, or you're creating a bigger mess than you had, arguably. And perhaps it's something that they maybe should have left for this off season, and come up with a really thorough plan, top to bottom, both to implement whatever you're going to implement, and at least as importantly, find a way to enforce what those substances might be. And then you have a consistency from across baseball. And I think that's the goal of what MLB is trying to do right now, but it's pretty hard to create that level playing field in the middle of a season.
Yeah, I just don't understand how this is hard. I mean, they already own Rawlings and took over creating and making and manufacturing the baseball. Why can they not come up with a substance that everybody is satisfied with? And you're right. I mean, the memo they put out the other day essentially says if you're caught with a foreign substance, based on what the umpires deem a foreign substance, it's 10 games and 10 days rather.
Right. So
a pitcher would miss two starts essentially, right? Or a bullpen guy, whatever you want to draw.
It's harder on the bullpen guys for sure.
Sure. And it's just bizarre, because you look at some of this stuff like spider tack, like that stuff definitely has to go. I mean, you read up about it. It was created so weightlifters could lift Atlas stones. And for our viewers and listeners that don't know what an Atlas stone is, it's a gigantic round boulder that weighs anywhere from 400 to 600 pounds, and weightlifters lift them up onto a shelf, basically.
Well, just Google it and you can see we talked about it last week, the guy with the cinder block holding it like that.
It's hilarious. Like the stuff is the stuff's incredible. It's
and
weird.
That's the motivation from MLB. I mean, it's like, come on, guys. We've let you use sticky stuff forever, but now you're bringing in this Atlas stuff. Come on.
Do you remember last year where the pitch came in, it just stuck to the catcher's chest protector?
That was a couple years ago. That was Yadi Molina, and it's
anyway. Hey, can I talk? Ryan, I just want to talk something about dear to my heart. Are we any closer to robotic umpires, at least for balls and strikes?
Man, I don't know. I mean,
it's not getting any better.
No, it's not. And, MLB continues to experiment with it at the lower levels of minor pro ball, and which makes you wonder if maybe it is coming. But, now that you have that strikeout box, or the K box that they call it on every broadcast, it's just, it's bad for the umpires, because, I mean, we see how many pitches a night do we see that not only are just outside of the corner of that box, sometimes they're a foot and a half out, and it's, they're really being home plate umpires are really being exposed as inaccurate. Even some of the good ones miss those calls, and with the technology there, with the other part about that is the proliferation and explosion of sports gambling. I mean, eventually MLB is going to be held to the fire that way, and they're going to have to be more consistent and more accurate. And the technology is there, and the technology is being experimented with. So, how much longer can it be before the home plate balls and strikes at least are being called electronically?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Rob, actually, because I've come to a point now where I'm fully on Clarkie's team here. I think that robot umps, to some degree, at least in terms of balls and strikes, absolutely at some point needs to come into the game. But I'm glad that you brought up that it's almost unfair for the umpires. And to me, this goes back to the sticky stuff conversation we just had. If you look at I'm sure lots of baseball fans out there follow Pitching Ninja on Twitter. If you don't, it's an amazing account. Rob does a great job. But if you look at some of the pitches that are being thrown today, Devin Williams' airbender, and I'm not saying Devin cheats, I'm not accusing him, or Blake Trinan's turbo sinker. If you look at the way some of these pitches move, I couldn't call them balls or strikes. Like the breaking stuff that guys are throwing now, we're seeing pitches that have never been seen before in baseball history. And I'm convinced sticky stuff is playing a huge factor in that. So it's definitely something that the MLB needs to sort out. It all goes hand in hand. Rob, I would just like to pick your brain a little bit before we let you go on the All-Star break. Obviously, we're a little less than a month away from All-Star, but are there any guys in your estimation that you've been watching all year that are absolute locks? I'm not saying name the whole roster or anything, but are there 4 or 5 guys that you've watched that absolutely need to be starters at the All-Star game?
Yeah, I think, you know, for the purpose of our conversation, in a lot of ways, you gotta look at the 2 big guns on the Blue Jays right now, Vlad Guerrero Jr. and Marcus Semien. I don't know how you could keep either of those 2 guys out of the starting lineup. And it's going to be really interesting to see if Guerrero goes in the home run derby. He talked about it. He was asked about it the other day, and he kind of waffled. He said, "Yeah, I'm thinking about it, leaning more towards yes." But can you imagine that dude hitting home runs at Coors Field in a home run derby? Like it would be just as amazing as the show was in Cleveland 2 years ago. I mean, that thing would be off the charts. But those are the 2 guys that really come to mind to me. I couldn't really give you a long list of names around baseball, but I think, you know, from the teams that I've been following, those 2 Jays definitely have to be on it.
I completely agree. Those guys got to be starters. You look around the league, DeGroms, you know, the Ohtanis of the world. I think that we'll definitely see them starting in the All-Star break. And yeah, I want to see Vlad crushing 480-foot bombs at Coors Field. It would be pretty entertaining. He is Rob Longley of the Toronto Sun, Blue Jays beat reporter. We really appreciate you joining us again, buddy. It's always great to talk ball with you.
Always fun. We'll do it again, guys. Thanks.
All right, we'll take a quick break here on MWO Sports. When we come back, there's lots to talk about in the NHL world, including, Clarkie's best buddy, Billy Idol, Dominique Ducharme and the Montreal Canadiens, and, of course, the other series involving Tampa and the Islanders. Things are heating up as we look for our combatants for the Stanley Cup Final. We'll talk about that next here on MWO Sports, brought to you by Coolbet.co.
This is MWO Sports.
Welcome back to MWO Sports, brought to you by Coolbet.co. Ryan Drury alongside Clarkie and Steve Sabourin. Still, we appreciate our friend Rob Longley of the Toronto Sun, Blue Jays beat reporter, for joining us to have a great chat about ball and all things Blue Jays and sticky stuff and all that great stuff. Let's talk, speaking of sticky stuff, let's talk about the NHL, guys, really quickly before we start talking playoffs. Pretty inflammatory article came out today from Rick Westhead of TSN regarding the Chicago Blackhawks. Boy, they are in the spotlight for a lot of not great reasons. 2 former players alleged back in 2010 on their cup run that their video coach at the time sexually assaulted 2 players. One of the training staff was aware of it, allegedly brought it forward to Blackhawks management. That would be Stan Bowman and, you know, Scott McDonough at the time. And they allegedly, according to this report, refused to file a police report on the players' behalfs. Now, again, this is there's a lot of he said, she said going on in this story. I encourage everybody to go read it, but not a banner day for the NHL and the Chicago Blackhawks organization. I have a funny feeling there are going to be some serious consequences from the fallout of this. The 2 former players were not named at their request, but there is a lawsuit filed, and basically the Blackhawks stance is they are trying to get the case thrown out based on the state of Illinois statute of limitations law, which
Wow, that really shines a light on it. Then, it's we did our investigation, nothing happened. It's there's a statute of limitations. Like, come on, give your head a shake. How many times in sports have we seen this come out? Like, I mean, this is a serious issue. I mean, and psychologically, people just don't come out 10 minutes later and say, "Hey, this happened." It is a dramatic effect on the psychology and emotion status of a person. And like, come on, you got to be better than this. You got to be better.
Yeah. Whether they get this thrown out based on that statute of limitations law, which guys, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an expert on Illinois state law, but in the court of public opinion, which is, very loud, and especially on these issues should be, it's not a great look for the Blackhawks, and the NHL needs to do a thorough investigation here. And if they determine that Stan Bowman or his upper echelon staff within the Blackhawks did know about this and did nothing, I'm of the opinion that they should all be banned for life. They should probably have their names removed 3 times from the Stanley Cup. I think that there should be a serious punishment here, including lifetime bans from hockey at any level. If the NHL can do an investigation and prove that some of these allegations are true, boy, they have got to throw the book at somebody for this. This is not a good look for the NHL, especially.
And after all the sport has been through, this past week, Sheldon Kennedy was given the Order of Hockey Canada for his work, because of what he went through, and then bringing things forward. I mean, you had Theo Fleury write his book. The issue with what happened back in Maple Leaf Gardens. It just goes on and on and on, and really disappointing that allegations like this still keep coming up.
And it's unfortunately, and from the NHL's perspective, they are probably in full panic mode at the head office in New York, because we're around the corner from their marquee event, the Stanley Cup Final, and this is what's blowing up right now and is the dominant story in the sport today as we record this. And they need to do an investigation and figure this all out. All right, guys, let's talk about some hockey. And Clarky, your buddy Billy Idol, I like your little reference there. Dominique Ducharme of the Montreal Canadiens. They tie up the series with Vegas. Montreal's now 8-1 when they score first in these playoffs, which I'm sure is another dagger in your Leaf fandom. Your guys' impression of how that series has played out so far, because Vegas, they could have won game 1 8-1. Like, Carey Price made some unbelievable saves, and then they bounce back with your typical Montreal performance and stifle Vegas's best players, and Carey Price is laughing and winking on the ice. Your impression of that series so far, Clarky, what do you think about your Montreal Canadiens?
Okay, never, ever, ever repeat that, Ryan Drury. Ever
Clarky,
say that again.
Quit the show.
Here's the deal. I cannot figure it out. I still don't think they're a good hockey team. I think they're clutching and grabbing and protecting a lead and playing 1-4 along their blue line, and they're not that good. How do they do it, Ryan, Steve? I don't know. I wish I could get the magic formula and put it into the dang Maple Leafs, because they seem to just do it time after time when you don't think they are. You can't tell me that the Leafs have more talent. They don't have more talent than the Montreal Canadiens. However, they're working harder and they're checking them into the ground, and it's boring. But that's just the way they're going to win. I don't know. I don't get it. I'm pissed off, and I just don't like it.
I think maybe you know what it is, Clarky. Maybe they're just watching loops of inspirational movie speeches. Maybe they're just watching Al Pacino's Any Given Sunday speech before they hit the ice. Steve,
the Leafs were up 3-1.
I know, Clarky. That's ancient history now, brother.
Pretty much over, as everyone thought. And then one bad overtime giveaway, and then another one, and then now they're if this team goes to the Stanley Cup Finals and if they win a game or two, I'm not turning my TV on.
Clarky's gonna be in a dark place pretty.
I will be. I guarantee I will be.
Steve, your thoughts?
Well, sometimes it just, you have it. They have a game plan. They execute it very well. Yes, they were sluggish in game one, but you got to remember they came off a 4-game sweep of Winnipeg. They had a lot of time to rest, and didn't have the legs.
But Steve, Winnipeg had the same when they started against Montreal, and they didn't win a game. So
no, and Montreal got their legs back, and they stuck to their game plan. Just watching part of the game the other night, in game 2, it looked a lot like Montreal versus Vegas, or Montreal versus Toronto, where Montreal would, hem Vegas in for a little bit, and then Vegas would break it out on a 3-on-2, and then Montreal would go back to work the offensive end for a couple more minutes.
It's not right.
Vegas would try to fast break.
It's not right. It's just not right. Toronto's on the sidelines. Edmonton's on the sidelines. Colorado's on the sidelines. All teams with way more talent than these guys. It's not right. We need an investigation.
But maybe that's part of their
I know, it's the only way they can play.
Everybody's telling them that you're not good enough. You're not good enough. Well, we're good enough. You know what? There was a team in the past called New Jersey that had a great goaltender, and they won a couple cups.
Boring hockey as well. And you know what? Maybe it'll sink into the guys who now Leaf fans are saying they're not good enough, like number 16. I really would love to see what happens with all this, how it's going to shake out. Zach Hyman.
I don't think he's coming back.
They've re-signed Spezza, which I like. League minimum. He's the kind of guy you need in my
on your fourth line.
But
yeah,
absolutely. Well, except he was one of the better players in the playoffs, which is a sign of trouble when he is. But is he coming back? Freddie's gone, I would think. I don't know what they'll do for their backup goaltender, but I think it's Jack Campbell's team now. But we'll see. We'll see. See how I just segued into the Leafs?
Yeah, so back to teams that are in the playoffs and actually playing important hockey right now. Let's look at Islanders Tampa. Man, that's been entertaining as well. That Islanders team, you just can't count them out. Anders Lee, their captain, taking line rushes with the reserve players yesterday, looking really good. If they make the Cup final, small potential. He comes back from a really bad knee injury that should have knocked him out for the year, at least I thought it did, but there he is taking line rushes. But the game so far, Tampa Bay, they got a little shell-shocked in game 1 and found out a little bit about what Barry Trotz hockey is all about, but they bounced back in game 2, which included more awful officiating. I mean, there were way too many men on the ice for a goal. Braden Point got called for goalie interference for getting cross-checked into the goalie. I cannot stand the way that referees interpret that call. It is
terrible.
Garbage.
Terrible call.
It's garbage, but the hockey's been really entertaining. Steve, I'll start with you this time because I don't want to hear about how it affects the Maple Leafs. What are your?
Well, the Islanders in their number playoff series, while their former captain is off somewhere else. Anyway,
no.
I think the Lightning have this series again. First game, feeling out your opponent. I think the Lightning will continue to step it up. They'll take it in 6, and they'll face Montreal in the Stanley Cup final.
Oh no! I'm not even going to ask Clarky what he thinks of the series.
Why not? Hey.
Okay, go ahead, Clarky.
Just think of this, okay?
I'm cutting you off if you mention the Maple Leafs.
If everything had have gone the way it should have gone,
no,
Tampa would have been playing the Maple Leafs right now.
Oh my God!
And it would have been exciting hockey, not one team trying to shut down another team. It would have been back and forth, 6-4, 6-5, 7-6, lots of goals, lots of action. But no, we watch
or just 7-1 or just 7-1 for Tampa because Toronto can't defend. But yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with your sentiment, Clarky. The NHL should investigate this and they should redo the playoffs.
Yes.
And have the Maple Leafs here. Absolutely, buddy. Okay, we'll take a quick break here. Thank you for your expert analysis, Clarky, on Billy Idol and the Montreal Canadiens. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll end the show, as always, by chatting with our wagering expert from Coolbet, Kris Abbott, here on MWO Sports, brought to you by Coolbet.co.
This is MWO Sports.
Back to wrap things up here on MWO Sports, brought to you by Coolbet.co. Ryan Drury alongside Clarky, and of course our wagering expert Kris Abbott from Coolbet. Abbott, how you doing, brother?
I'm going to be completely honest. I'm a little bit nervous about this group stage at the Euro. We are taking significant losses through the first 18 matches. I'm sure it'll turn around. It generally does. Las Vegas and other sports books certainly don't exist on people winning money. But for a short period in time, like this week so far, 15 of the 18 matches have gone against us. So we're in a serious deficit position on this tournament, and it'll be interesting to see if we can climb our way back out of it.
I apologize, sir. I am responsible for decent chunks of some of that. And I'll toot my own horn a little bit, and I will be keeping my picks to myself to help you out, buddy. So I won't give my friends any more tips and tricks. So Clarky, don't ask me. All right.
What were you guys talking about? Sorry.
Oh, good.
Soccer?
grief.
Yeah, move on.
Okay. Let's quickly review our picks. Now, Abbott, Pat, our good friend Pat Gregoire, represented Coolbet in picking our Stanley Cup semifinal picks. I know producer Adam's got them ready here for our viewers. So we all submitted our picks before the round started. Let's talk Golden Knights, Canadiens. I have Vegas in 5. Clarky had them sweeping, so he's already wrong.
No, I'm fine.
Clarky. No. And Steve had Montreal in 6. Pat from Coolbet had Vegas in 5, like myself. Producer Adam, took Montreal in 7. So far, what do you think of those picks there, Abbott, and what would you have picked?
Yeah, I would have picked Vegas in 5 or 6 as well. And I still think that's what's going to happen. They were outstanding in game 1. And then, the thing with this Montreal team that we've obviously learned already is you can't rest on your laurels against them. They won't let you. So, if Vegas wasn't ready to go when the puck dropped in game 2, we saw what happened. But ultimately, I think, it's going to be 5 or 6 games. This will be done.
He is on the record. All right, let's talk about our Lightning and Islanders picks as well that we all submitted before the round started. And I took Tampa in 7. I think that's going to happen. I think Barry will give them a war, but the defending champs will get by. We all took Tampa. Clarky had Tampa in 7. Steve had Tampa in 5. Pat took Tampa in 6. Adam took Tampa in 5. Abbott, some pretty, interesting picks. They're not really giving the Isles much credit.
Well, yeah, I mean, Tampa should win this series. I do see it going 6 or 7 games, but I wouldn't be shocked if the New York Islanders are playing for the Stanley Cup this year. Wouldn't be shocked at all.
I wouldn't be shocked either, my friend. It would be pretty interesting, and they're a fun team to watch. And hey, Barry Trotz always has a special place in my heart as a Caps fan. Still can't believe they let him walk and didn't sign him after winning a Stanley Cup, one of the dumbest ownership decisions of all time. Let's talk about good decisions in terms of betting this weekend. I know you're already getting kicked a little bit with the Euro picks on Coolbet, but if there were some hot bets to pay attention to this weekend, there's plenty to bet on, Kris.
U.S. Open, too. We need to talk about that.
We got to talk U.S. Open. Our buddy Corey Connors having a bit of an up and down round, but U.S. Open's on. NHL and NBA playoffs continue. What are some things people should maybe pay attention to and key in on, my friend?
Well, you talk about the U.S. Open. I think a lot of people get, really excited about their pre-tournament bets and see what happens, throughout 4 rounds. But hey, after a couple of rounds, you can still bet. You can bet, all the way up into the final round and during the final round. So there's going to be opportunities for guys who maybe don't have the best first couple of rounds, but still make the cut and maybe are in the top 10 or 15 who might put a push on the weekend. So if there's anybody you like before the tournament, take a closer look at their odds on Saturday morning and see where they're sitting, and you might be able to grab some value out of that.
Absolutely. I mean, the U.S. Open, it's always fun to watch. I will throw out a hot bet for people, maybe for my gearheads out there. Last time we had our buddy Pat Gregoire on, we were chatting a little bit about my recent good call on an F1 race at Monaco. I took Max Verstappen to win. He was keying in on multi-champion Lewis Hamilton. French Grand Prix this weekend. Take my boy Max Verstappen to win at Circuit Paul Ricard. Take Sebastian Vettel to finish top 5 and take Daniel Ricciardo to finish top 5 as well. He always does well at the French Grand Prix. That would be my suggestion. I don't know if you have any thoughts to offer on that, Kris.
Well, Sebastian Vettel is the guy we've forgotten all about. You know, he was 1-2 with Lewis Hamilton for years and years. And yeah, I'm looking at him at Coolbet now, top 6 plus 500. So top 10 minus 118, which, obviously he's not with the big team anymore, and that makes a difference. But I will go back to the well on Lewis Hamilton. He's plus 110 as we're speaking right now. He's had a couple of bad weeks. That doesn't fly for him and Mercedes, so I'd look for him to get right back to the top of the podium, or at least on the podium here this weekend.
It wouldn't shock me, but I cannot go against my boy Max Verstappen and Team Red Bull. So take it for what it's worth. I have been winning little chunks of money here and there, folks. So sometimes I have okay advice, just not as good as our buddy Kris from Coolbet. All right, Abbott, we really appreciate it, brother.
All right, thanks so much for having me on, guys. I'll talk to you next week.
Absolutely. All right, guys, remember you can listen to this show Friday nights at 6 on CKNX AM920, CKNX.ca. Find us on social media at MWO_sports. Watch the show Friday nights at 8, Sunday nights at 9 with our friends on Wightman TV. And remember, we debut on YouTube Friday nights at 9 p.m. And remember, CKNX carrying all the Blue Jays games for the rest of the season. For myself, Ryan Drury, Clarkie, Steve Sabrin, our guest Rob Longley from the Toronto Sun, and our wagering expert, Kris Abbott from Coolbet. We appreciate you listening to and watching MWO Sports, brought to you by Coolbet.co.